America. So welcome to the show. This is the Equally Yoked Show. If you're just joining us for the first time, this is going to be a wonderful show as we unpack some of the amazing things that the administration so far has done. Of course, many people have gripes and complaints about the administration, and by all means, let me know your thoughts in the chat. But what we're going to be looking at is essentially win after win after win. And this is what the American people wanted. The American people wanted accountability, and this is somewhat, we're getting there, somewhat of what we're getting when it comes to some of the corrupt Democrat politicians. Now, as you guys join in on the podcast, I want to know your thoughts, so you can email me, freedom@equallyyokeshow.com. Of course, share in the chat down below. Keep it modest. And of course, if you have any comments that are debatable, make them intelligible so we can talk about them thoroughly as we discuss these things. But of course, the first clip that we're going to be looking at is Donald Trump, who's putting Ilhan Omar on blast and talking about the Minneapolis scam and what's happening there. Of course, the removal of over 1,000, the protection, temporary protected status for some of these Somalians, at least up to 1,000 reports are saying, over 1,000 reports are saying. So we're going to be looking at what is happening on this front and several other clips that we'll also be covering. But otherwise, subscribe to the podcast. We're going to get right into it. Here we go.
You know, they came from a place with nothing, and they come here and they drive around in Mercedes-Benz. You know, the Mercedes-Benz dealers do well in that area of Minnesota. Can you believe it? They have nothing. They get welfare payments, and they have Mercedes-Benzes. It angers me so much, but we're going to straighten out our country. This was done under Biden and Obama, very much under Obama. It all started under Obama. And we just can't. We've got a great country. We're not going to screw it up. But this was one of the great scams ever. They have the same thing, Somali in Maine. Who would think? I never saw that happening. But in Maine, it's really crooked as hell, too.
Now, there's calls for investigations into many other states, such as Washington. In this case, he says Maine and some others that are calling for anybody that is, looking into these Somalian fraud, that maybe it's happening in their own state. California is on the hot plate to be looked at as the FBI probes into California. There's going to be so much waste, fraud, and abuse when it comes to this 2026 midterm election cycle. What we're going to see here, hopefully, is to upend all of the corruption. Now, we're going to also see a little bit of a clip concerning the Epstein files with Clinton not showing up. We're going to go over that clip in a moment. But let's continue on here with Donald Trump is saying.
But it's not just Somali. It is them, but it's not just. There are many other places, many other people. The whole country. If we stop this fraud, this massive fraud, we're going to have a balanced budget. That's how much money you're talking. We'll have a balanced budget without all the growth I'm talking about. And then you add the growth, we got one hell of a country. We're giving 90-day notices to places like California, Scott. Right away, we're going to send out that notice. Who would bill the federal government as people poured into the state to send those people back, because no country can afford to do it? No country can afford to take in millions of people, pay for their education, their health care, their hospitals. You just can't do it. And we all have a heart. You can't do it. But many of those people are murderers. They're people released from jails, prisons, mental institutions, insane asylums. They're people that are drug dealers. They're addicts. Additionally, starting February 1st, we're not making any payments to sanctuary cities or states having sanctuary cities, because they do everything possible to protect criminals at the expense of American citizens, and it breeds fraud and crime and all of the other problems that come. So we're not making any payment to anybody that supports sanctuary cities. We have also suspended nearly 8,000 SBA loans, Small Business Association loans, to suspected scammers in Minnesota, of which there are many. It's a great state. It was a great state. Now it's getting destroyed by that stupid governor. What a stupid guy he is. But he's a crook.
Now, I just put a poll out for those that are joined into this podcast. Vote in the new poll that we have concerning the question, is Donald Trump delivering on his campaign promises from what he had mentioned back in 2024 and just before they convicted him in New York City? We're looking at some of the things that he's doing today. Now, just for a quick moment here, Trump warns concerning tariffs, because tariffs has most certainly been one of the huge topics of the day. Trump warns that we're screwed if the Supreme Court rules against emergency tariffs. So this is President Trump declared Monday that the U.S. would be screwed if the Supreme Court rules against his reciprocal tariff policies, because the government would have to pay back billions in revenue collected over the past year. Now, let's go to his Truth Social post for a moment just to get a better idea as to what he's talking about concerning these tariffs. And so here's the statement here. Okay, so he says the actual numbers that we would have to pay back if, for any reason, the Supreme Court were to rule against the United States of America on tariffs would be many hundreds of billions of dollars, and that doesn't include the amount of payback that countries and companies would require for the investments that they are making on building plants, factories, and equipment for the purpose of being able to avoid the payments of tariff. When these investments were added or are added, we are talking about trillions of dollars. It would be a complete mess and almost impossible for a country to pay. Anybody who says that it can be quickly and easily done would be making a false, inaccurate, or totally misunderstood answer to this very large and complex question. It is not. It may not be possible, but if it were, it would be dollars that would be so large that it would take many years to figure out what number we are talking about, and even who, when, where to pay. Remember, when America shines brightly, the world shines brightly. In other words, if the Supreme Court rules against the United States of America on this national security bonanza, we're screwed. What do you guys think concerning this? Do you guys think that if the Supreme Court will rule against these reciprocal tariffs, it is quite possible that they may make that move? But so far, they've been in favor of many of the challenges made against Donald Trump and his administration. So only time will tell. But concerning the speech here, you're looking at what he's going to say concerning Ilhan Omar. Let's continue on here. And I want to know your thoughts concerning this speech, concerning what we're covering here. Email me also, freedom@equallyyokeshow.com.
I mean, he's an incompetent guy, but he's a crook.
By the way, Raven, you say he's doing more than I thought was possible, but I'm behind it 1,000%. And somebody by the name of Theo says, telling Iran people to demonstrate without weapons. This is what they have. I mean, whether he were to say, demonstrate with weapons, demonstrate without weapons, people are going to hate it regardless, because Trump is saying it. This is Trump derangement syndrome at best. Now, I'm not saying you're calling this Trump, if this is totally against what he's saying concerning Iran, because we're going to look at some of the statements that he said concerning Iran in just a moment here on his Truth Social. But let's continue on for a little moment longer.
Allow this to go. You can't have corruption on a scale that nobody's ever seen before, and you're sitting as a governor and you don't know what's going on. It's impossible, even though he's a stupid guy. We're investigating large-scale visa fraud, and the Department of Justice has already charged nearly 100 people in criminal conspiracies in Minnesota. They're all over the place. Last week, we announced that I'm creating a brand new division at the Department of Justice, a legal strike force led by a really tough, smart new Attorney General for fraud. He's a fantastic young guy. He's so impassioned to do this properly. We intend to imprison any fraudster, politician, or public official involved in these sick plots to loot and pillage our country. Think of that Ilhan Omar. She lives in Somalia. They don't have a government. They don't have a military. They don't have police. They don't have anything. All they have is murder and robbing ships, bringing in ships, pirates. That's stopped. Same missile, ping. That's the end of them. It's amazing how that can stop corruption. Those missiles, they never miss, you know. The same one, exactly the same one. But think of it, she comes from a country with nothing, and she comes here and she tells us about our Constitution. I have a constitutional right to rip off the country. I guess she's a total scam artist.
Now, first of all, I really don't understand when it comes to the folks in Minnesota who are protesting. This protest has gotten so big because of, obviously, the killing of Renee Good. However, a lot of this sparked up when the fraud was revealed. I mean, Americans should be happy about this, that this is being upended, that we're not being taken advantage of by the folks that continue to go online, these Somalians that continue to post online saying, go to work, go work for me, go pay me my salary. They're being outright trolls about this when this is a serious matter. Now, as I mentioned, he talks about the fact that he removed the temporary protected status of over 1,000 plus Somalians, and this growing number of the removal of Somalians who have caused a lot of harm to the American people. And so, as we continue on with some of the news concerning this, we have a lot of other things concerning, of course, Ilhan Omar. So let's go here because Ilhan Omar, they're issuing a subpoena, immigration records of Ilhan Omar, an ex-husband, during the hearing. So let's take a look at this clip because she is under hot water for her marriage, and this is something that has been looked into, but never actually seen. We haven't never actually seen any action taken concerning this. Some government action, of course, because of Joe Biden and his puppets. Here it is.
I'll recognize Ms. Mace to explain her motion.
Yes, this is to subpoena the immigration records of Ilhan Omar and her alleged brother husband and another husband whose names I cannot pronounce. The Committee on Oversight and Government Reform is the principal oversight committee of the U.S. House of Representatives and has broad authority to investigate any matter at any time under House Rule 10. And this particularly, the legislative thing that this would inform would identify reforms regarding immigration fraud and denaturalization processes, potential criminal liability, things that we needed to address statutorily and legislatively. Mr. Chairman, thank you.
Thank you. Chair recognizes Mr. Garcia to speak on the Mace amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do have an amendment to the motion made by Representative Mace.
State your amendment.
At the end of the motion, I'd like to add, pursuant to Clause 2K6 of House Rule 11, the committee shall subpoena all documents and communications from the Department of Defense regarding the military service record of Representative Corey Mills of Florida.
Amen.
All documents, communications, and contracts from the Department of Defense, Department of Justice, of Interior, of Homeland Security, and Department of State related to Representative Corey Mills of Florida. And any business in which he or any relative has a financial or controlling interest, including Pacom Defense, Pacom Solutions International LLC, ALS LLC, and any documents and communications from the Department of Justice, the U.S. Attorney's Office for the District of Columbia, Ed Martin, in his personal capacity, and the White House regarding any communications around the February 2025 domestic violence incident in Washington, D.C., involving Representative Corey Mills of Florida. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to be recognized to explain the amendment.
Now, concerning Ilhan Omar, we're getting off a little bit from the subject here with the rest of this hearing here, but otherwise, the fraud and the oversight committee here concerning Minnesota and what's happening there, which honestly calls for further investigations into the other states that are possibly, especially with California, which we saw that they are putting a probe into California And what will be upended here under Gavin Newsom, the number is over 200 million, I believe, of money that is just gone. And Californians keep on electing these idiots into office. It's quite wild, but that guy you just saw there, Mr. Garcia, is actually one who's he was champion, I think, at the beginning of the for the Epstein, the latest Epstein ruling that just passed to release all the files. But here we have James Comer speaking to reporters after Bill refuses, this is Bill Clinton, to testify in Epstein probe. Let's take a look at this clip because we're still getting updates little by little concerning these Epstein files.
All right. Well, I think everyone knows by now Bill Clinton did not show up. And I think it's important to note that this subpoena was voted on in a bipartisan manner by this committee. This wasn't something that I just issued as chairman of the committee. This was voted on by the entire committee in a unanimous vote of the House Oversight Committee to subpoena former President Clinton and former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton. Now, Hillary Clinton's supposed to show up tomorrow. We'll see what happens there. But with respect to the former president, he did not show up today. One reason I think most Americans want President Clinton to answer some questions is because he visited the White House. Jeffrey Epstein visited the White House 17 times while Bill Clinton was president. I've been in Congress 9 years. I think I've been to the White House 9 times in 9 years. Epstein was in the White House double the amount of time that I was under one president. And then we know that Bill Clinton flew on Epstein's plane somewhere around 27 times after the presidency. So no one's accusing Bill Clinton of any wrongdoing. We just have questions, and that's why the Democrats voted along with Republicans to subpoena Bill Clinton.
Now this makes him look all the more guilty. Why in the world wouldn't he show up? What has he got to hide? Where did he go? Did he flee? All these questions that we need answered concerning the Epstein probe and what is happening here, with the files, because we saw at the very beginning, which was a terrible move by the Trump administration, rather, is to say on a Sunday night to a release of an article on Axios, basically, there's nothing to see here. It was a bad move, and they had to undo all the nonsense that they did, the damage that they did, because they were talking about the transparency. And I think they're shifting a little bit here to go back to, the promises of transparency in this administration, and let's continue to hold our leaders accountable. And this is why we need to pray for our leaders, that all the wickedness will be upended. And of course, all the truth will be revealed, regardless if we are for the Democrats or the Republicans. But this is what we're seeing concerning Epstein. This is the sort of update. Let's continue on here for a little bit longer.
Single Democrat showed up today. Not a single Democrat.
And by the way, for the few that are saying, well, Trump is a felon. Now remember that they created a political martyr back when he was convicted. Okay, he was convicted only really for the ability and the title for people to say you elected a convicted felon. And so when we looked at that moment in time in American history, we saw that huge turnout. Is as if all America was almost synchronized into calling this ridiculous. Democrats called this ridiculous, the conviction. And many that were anti-Trump or were considering not voting for Trump had actually changed their minds to go and take to their wallet and donate to the campaign. And so he only grew from that moment on. Then we even consider the assassination attempts, multiple assassination attempts on his life. And by God's grace, the nation was spared from Kamala Harris and Tim Walz. I mean, be honest with me in the chat. Do you think that would have been a good idea, having Tim Walz and Kamala Harris running the country? I think we would have saw a country that would have already collapsed by now. Maybe that's probably more of a hyperbolic statement than anything. Our country would have been dead. Let's continue on here a little more longer.
The ones that have press conferences on the Capitol steps and talk about how they're trying to get justice for the victims and all that. It just seems like they only care about questioning Republicans. And we've had a former Trump cabinet secretary, Acosta, in for a grilling. We had Bill Barr, former attorney general, in for a grilling. But for whatever reason, President Clinton didn't show up, and the Democrats on the committee don't seem to have a problem. This is the amount of preparation that went into this deposition today. These were the questions that we were prepared to ask. We've communicated with President Clinton's legal team for months now, giving them opportunity after opportunity to come in, to give us a date, and they continue to delay to the point where we had no idea whether they're going to show up today or not. I think it's very disappointing. As a result of Bill Clinton not showing up for his lawful subpoena, which again was voted on unanimously by the committee in a bipartisan manner, we will move next week in the House Oversight Committee markup to hold former President Clinton in contempt of Congress.
Now, of course, for what we're witnessing concerning the fraud that is happening in Somalia, now we're talking about, as I mentioned earlier, the protective status that is removed from the Somalians. We're going to look at a clip here when it comes to some of the statements that Trump has said and some of the things that he's actually revoked from Minnesota. Here we go.
It's unbelievable what we have to go through. It's really a shame, actually. We froze it all, children's payments to those states that we're talking about, and we will now require proof of attendance in order to receive federal funding for child care or any of that. How about all these child care places in Minnesota where there is no children? They go there, they get paid millions and millions of dollars. The biggest operation in all of Minnesota had no children. And we pay millions of dollars. They're scammers. They're scammers. They always will be. And we're getting them out, and we're not going to pay them. We're not going to pay Minnesota. Right, Scott? We're not paying Minnesota any more money for that, any of that crap. It's a big scam. It's a giant scam run by an incompetent, crooked governor. He's an incompetent, crooked guy. And also, we're freezing any and all welfare payments going to illegal immigrants that will start effective immediately. So when illegals come into California, Gavin Newsom, they come into California, and they send us bills for people coming in. We're not paying it. So we're working on that very strongly. Just don't pay it. As Nancy Reagan would say, just say no. You remember Nancy Reagan? Just say no to drugs. It's a little more difficult than that, I guess, right? But just say no. Additionally, from this moment forward, if you're on public assistance, like almost all Somalis are, did you see where 94% of them are on public assistance?
Now, concerning this is from a report back in January of 2024. The Subcommittee on Oversight and Investigations, the U.S. House Committee on Energy and Commerce. This is a testimony from Robert Rector saying the impact of Biden policies can be seen by comparing the current situation with the prior presidencies. In fiscal year 2023, there were 3,200,000 encounters between inadmissible aliens in the U.S. government nationwide. In 2016, the last year of the Obama administration, there were 690,000 such encounters. This 460% increase in inadmissible alien encounters is a direct and obvious result of Biden policies, which deliberately encourage, facilitate, and reward illegal immigration. Now, we looked at a chart that Elon Musk tweeted. You know what? For the sake of this conversation here, I do want to bring you to that X post. I got to stop saying tweet, but that X post, because it really shows us the reality of the reward when it comes to the Democrats who want illegals to vote for them. And so we have to look at this post by the one and only Elon Musk. And so here it is. Let me show you the picture. This is the original post. And here's the cycle, right? It starts with incentivizing the illegal immigration by vastly expanding welfare and giving it to non-citizens. So it starts on the right here, then illegal immigration floods in, mail-in ballots plus no photo ID, and then you win elections, and then you continue this cycle on and on. And so this is what is being upended and uprooted. This is the same thing, but this is Elon Musk saying this has been happening for years. Ilhan Omar is the most obvious example. A large number of relatively recent arrived Somalis will elect only a Somali to Congress in that Minnesota district. This is much more subtle, but just as bad in many other parts of America. Now, of course, if you actually look at her response here, this is her response saying, "You are one of the dumbest people on earth. My district is literally a majority white district. Your conspiracy theories are laughable and should have no place in society that cares about facts." But of course, if you look at the comments, here it says the survey, this is somebody asking Grok, based on 2024 American Community Survey data, approximately 6 to 7% of Minnesota's 5th district population is of Somali descent. It says Muslim population estimates range from 8 to 12%, accounting for Somalis and other groups, which though exact figures aren't collected by the census. And so we'd probably have a better idea when it comes to the 2030 census and what will happen then. And we'll see where we are. This is still quite a couple of years away. This is 4 years away. Even then, we have 2028 in front of us. So going back here for a moment, but it says illegal aliens in the U.S. generally have low levels of education. For example, at least 40% of adult illegal aliens lack a high school degree compared to 6% of U.S. born adults. Because they have low education and skill levels, illegal aliens tend to have lower wages. Now, with the case of figuring out how to run Leering centers, where they can just rack in all of this government money, and they can utilize these funds to basically create a fraudulent business. And what happens at that point is they can then show fraudulently that they have children there. And some of this paperwork mysteriously disappears when DHS goes to audit. Even the police firing back at this response and saying, look, we're actually not going to accept their, what do you call this? The word is slipping my mind. They challenged this by saying, we don't believe that somebody actually broke in to steal these documents. And first of all, who's looking for these documents in the first place? Kind of dumb. But they're just trying to find ways to avoid being removed and to have their money taken away from them, because it's giving them a nice big fat old paycheck, the American dollar, from the American taxpayer. So back with Donald Trump here in a moment, it says illegal aliens generally have low levels. Okay, we already read that. So we're talking about the government benefits and the services that so here it says illegal aliens tend to have lower wages and receive much more in government benefits and services than they pay in taxes. On average, they receive $2.40 in benefits and services for every $1 in taxes paid. So it says illegal aliens impose a net fiscal cost, government benefits received minus taxes paid, of $110 billion per year on U.S. taxpayers. How much is $110 billion? It is equivalent to an 82-cent tax on every gallon of gas sold in the U.S. As the illegal alien population continues to grow rapidly, these costs will soar. Let's go back to this clip of Donald Trump.
You can't wire money out of the country back to your bank account from where you came. But more importantly, we probably aren't even going to give them the money.
Now, first of all, somebody said here, people are just broke and angry. They need a scapegoat rather than look deep inside and find out they are the real problem and it's their own fault. Their life is a mess. Well, look, sure, we can take this and apply it to our own lives, and we can say, well, what is causing me to be in this financial situation, whether we're struggling? But the reality is, when you import the third world, you become the third world. You have to figure out, if there's 10 million coming into the country under the Biden administration, where are you going to place all these immigrants? Now, of course, you have sanctuary cities, which actually Trump mentioned that he's going to remove the federal funds from sanctuary cities. The states will lose these funds on February 1st, but you have to figure out housing situations for them. You have to figure out schooling situations for them. And the Biden administration incentivized them to come into the border by opening the border, allowing them to walk in, cutting in front of the line, in front of all of these folks that have been waiting to obtain citizenship. And it was completely unlawful. And so when you have presidents, past presidents, politicians who've called for deportations, such as the deporter-in-chief, man by the name of Barack Obama, people get all upset and they get furious by this. This is him.
If you're a criminal, you'll be deported. If you plan to enter the U.S. illegally, your chances of getting caught and sent back just went up. The actions I'm taking are not only lawful, they're the kinds of actions taken by every single Republican president and every single Democratic president for the past half century.
I think we got to have tough conditions. Tell people to come out of the shadows. If they've committed a crime, deport them. No questions asked. They're gone.
All Americans, not only in the states most heavily affected, but in every place in this country, are rightly disturbed by the large numbers of illegal aliens entering our country.
This is why this is so great to have these archives and, of course, the internet to go and fact check the Democrats who are morally and honestly, they just are inconsistent with their politics. This is who they are. This is what they choose to be, but it says starting February 1st, we are not making any payments to sanctuary cities or states having sanctuary cities because they do everything possible to protect criminals at the expense of American citizens, Trump said during a speech in Detroit. It breeds fraud and crime and all of the other problems that come, so we're not making any payments to anybody that supports sanctuary cities. The Justice Department identifies 12 states, including California, Illinois, and New York, and 5 of the nation's 10 largest cities, such as the Big Apple, as sanctuary jurisdictions. You'll see it'll be significant, Trump added. So this is what these cities are up against. Now, of course, this is Mayor Brandon Johnson talking about and threaten the threat that Trump made concerning this, saying President Trump's announcement that he will attempt to cut off federal funds from Chicago for political reasons. This is not merely just political reasons, but in general, this is correct. Political reasons, because the politics of this is causing Americans and the dollar of the Americans to not have any type of weight behind it. The American dollar needs to strengthen. And a lot of this is caused by bad policies. We're going to get into that more in a moment, but let's continue his quote here, saying that is blatant and unconstitutional and immoral. We will be relentless until we restore every dollar that has been withheld by the Trump administration, those funds that belong to the people of Chicago, not the resident, or rather, not the president. Chicagoans pay billions in federal taxes, and it is far past time that we receive our just due from the federal government. Instead of investigating in healthcare, education, and jobs, this president is spending taxpayer dollars building up his personal militarized force in CBP and ICE and enriching his corporate donors. Chicago will never back down from a fight. To the president, our message is simple: we will see you in court. Following along the same messaging of Zoran Mamdani that says that he's going to continue to take on Trump, as what he said during his campaign, that he hopes the headlines read that very statement that I just mentioned. But when it comes to Minnesota and the ICE, the ICE agent who shot and killed Renee Good, this New York Post says ICE agent unlikely to face charges in Renee Good's death. The ICE agent who fatally shot protester Renee Nicole Good in Minnesota is unlikely to face criminal charges, as the Justice Department is not expected to open a civil rights probe into the deadly ordeal, according to a report. Federal investigators assigned to probe last week's fatal encounter are looking increasingly less likely to charge the agent, Jonathan Ross, after he opened fire on the 37-year-old. It says the New York Times reported, citing sources familiar with the investigation. So we've been on this subject for a couple of days now, being that it happened on the 7th of January. This is what we're still seeing with ICE agents who continue to be harmed because of the rhetoric of Jacob Frey, because of the rhetoric of Ilhan Omar and the things that she says concerning that she was peaceful. She was not peaceful. She was an agitator, a professional one at best. And so this is what we see. We continue to see the consequences of words that are spoken to harm, to essentially that will harm ICE agents who are there to protect the Americans from criminals who broke into the country.
Come out of the car. Come out of the car. Come out of the car. Open the window. No, he's in proceedings. He's good to go. Let me get my break. Go in the window.
Watch out behind you. Watch out. Holy. Watch out in front of you. Watch out in front.
Get out of the car. Get out of the car. Watch it. He's got a ramp. Cut it off. Cut it off. Now. Cut it off. Turn off the car. Cut the car. Cut off. Come out of the car. Come out of the car. Come out. Now. Hey.
So, of course, this is a dangerous job. Dangerous job for those that want to be, who want to support President Trump and his agenda. We saw an ICE agent who was being harassed, who said that he loves his job and he would do it for free if he could. He needs a paycheck, of course. Talking about that he went to high school and makes $200K a year. When somebody's flaunting his credentials, it's ridiculous. And there are many that support ICE in the efforts of ICE to keep our nation safe. This is why we have borders. And so, for those that are saying that she didn't weaponize her vehicle, she absolutely weaponized her vehicle. Because we have Ilhan Omar and Mayor Jacob Frey trying to say that she did a 3 to 4 to 5 point turn. When clearly you've seen video clips, and let me actually pull it up for you, because this is just fascinating. The amount of lies that we see online and on social media. We even saw the New York Post do this, where they tried to show different angles as to the ICE officer not really being in front. So here we go. This is a clip here, and I want to try to get this for you in clear view. Hopefully I can actually show this in a... Here we go. We're gonna bring this into the footage here. Onto your screens, rather. All right. Let's take a look. This is CNN. I mean, CNN of all places. Here we go. This is actually a repost from Jack Posobiec.
Colored SUV driven by Renee Nicole Good. That's on the right there in the back. The surveillance video taken by a home nearby. Agents can be seen milling about near the vehicle, then converging on it. And then you see right there the SUV begins to move, and that's when the shots are fired.
You know, the thing about camera placement.
Now, prior to this, the video shows the SUV had been...
I want to pause here for a moment because it's going to continue on here. But the thing about camera placement and how people are recording and the different angles that we see, depending on how far you are, the focal length, you're not going to get a good idea as to the distance between the officer and the car. And so we're seeing all of this different footage that proves otherwise. We see the ICE officer's point of view. We see this camera footage that is from, kind of an interesting camera angle. However, it manages to capture the front of this. And so you might think, the perception that is there, that is displayed on camera, you might think, well, this is what they were doing. What the New York Times was doing was gathering footage, and it looked very clear that he was sort of on the side or whatever. But then you get the other angle, and you get a more clear picture.
Stationary and sideways across the road like that for about 3 minutes. The reason for that is unclear.
CNN has obtained some new video. Again, it's grainy and distant, but it shows 4 full minutes leading up to the shooting. It shows Renee Good's maroon Honda Pilot entering from the right there. Then 20 seconds later, someone gets out on the passenger side. We don't know who or why this person leaves the car.
I believe that's her girlfriend or wife or whoever she is.
We then see her turn and pull perpendicular across the street, seeming to block the way. But as you see here, leaving room for vehicles to pass by her on either side. Finally, there is this new angle of the federal officer who shot her. He arrives. Another federal SUV pulls up. As the ICE officer briefly goes back to his car, then he returns, and with another agent grabbing at her door, she starts to move forward. Again, it's hard to see from this angle, followed by 3 gunshots in quick succession.
Now, again, just to remind you, for those that are saying, she was acting peacefully, look, you're not to impede law enforcement. It is against the law. It's as plain, as simple as that. Her actions had consequences. We've been saying this for the last couple of days. Her actions had consequences. She would not be dead if indeed she put herself in the situation. It's terrible. It's terrible that she lost her life, but this is what she chose to do. This is what we begin to see people that are radicalized to go and impede law enforcement. And then we have Ilhan Omar, who is absolutely fed up and upset because of the fraud, because of this killing, which she probably doesn't care. She's probably maybe a little glad inside that they have a sort of martyr here so they can take the eyes off of what's happening in Minnesota, the fraud that is happening. Give them a little bit of leeway, a little bit of time to recoup and gather some distractions. Meanwhile, this begins to get uncovered. Let's look at Ilhan Omar on Face the Nation. There you go.
Fraud that has been discovered is no longer being conducted now. Is there any justification for saying this food stamp money is somehow being misused?
Yeah, there are ways to investigate fraud, which we have been doing in Minnesota, which the federal government has been doing under the Biden administration. There is no reason for them to use this level of rhetoric. There is no reason for them to fully stop the funding these programs. The only reason they are doing that is for PR purposes. And it is harming our state. It is harming my constituents. Yeah. And it is creating the kind of chaos and confusion that no one needs in this moment.
That no one needs at this moment because of the chaos. I mean, honestly, really, Ilhan Omar. Now, I want to address a comment here before I continue back on this, because somebody said, did the ICE officer really think he was in... do you think, here, let me get the exact quote here. Do you think the cop thought his life was in danger from a car going 5 miles per hour? Whether it was 5, whether it was 2, this vehicle, I mean, weighing, how much would this car weigh? I mean, a couple 100 pounds, a couple 1,000 pounds? What's the weight of a vehicle, of an average sedan vehicle? We'll say 4,000 to 5,000 pounds. And the man who weighs probably 200 something, maybe 100 to 200, we'll say 150 to 200 pounds. It's like, how are we going to justify, even if it is 5 miles an hour? This car can still do damage, despite the fact that it would be going 5 miles an hour. If indeed that was the case. Now, we don't have an odometer reading. Now, people are using, obviously, sort of hyperbolic language there. But the reality is, this car, and based on his assessment, in the split second that he had to decide whether it was going to be his life or to protect his fellow officers from her possibly doing something else dumb. But it's ridiculous that they continue to say that she did a 3 to 4 to 5 point turn. And let me see if I can find it here on this Face the Nation part. Interview, as it loads here for a moment.
We're joined now.
So I just want to know your guys' thoughts concerning this, because this is absolutely ridiculous. Might not be on this interview. Yeah, I know Jacob Fry in the one of the other videos that we played on this podcast literally talks about the 5 point turn that she supposedly took. And so let me get this clip for you. And this is from CNN.
They support our law enforcement.
Okay, let me go back. Here we go. This is what we're looking for. Here's the CNN clip.
Anybody can see that this victim is not a domestic terrorist. I mean, my goodness, she's like doing a 3 or a 4 or 5 point turn. this looks like somebody that's trying to get out of there. If doing a 3-point turn or a 4-point turn is a domestic terrorist, then my wife is a criminal every single day.
And so, according to him, somebody who's trying to do a 3-4-point turn, this makes her a domestic terrorist. This is not what makes her the domestic terrorist. The domestic terrorist part comes from the fact that she was impeding law enforcement. This is ridiculous. And this is the type of rhetoric. Even when he calls for with the criticisms.
Joining us now to respond, Minneapolis Mayor
concerning the rhetoric that he is sharing. Let me go here to pull up the transcript really quick.
Does your rhetoric need to change?
Yeah, I said this was a federal agent recklessly using power that ended up in somebody dying, because that was a federal agent recklessly using power that ended up in somebody dying. It's exactly what happened. I mean, am I biased in this? Of course, and I'm biased because I got 2 eyes. Anybody can see these videos. Anybody can see that this victim is not a domestic terrorist.
And then, of course, you saw the clip that we just played. So he continues on, talks about telling ICE, get the F out of here. Many of them calling them, even Ilhan Omar calling them terrorists. The Gestapo. This is ridiculous. This is what gets, it causes people to have this sort of need to harm ICE because of the radicalization of the Democratic left. And so Ilhan Omar saying there is no justification for the search of the fraud, but we ask the question, at what point does this situation like this warrant justification, according to her? Because she talks about that under the Biden administration, that this was all being investigated, that the government and the 2 governments were working hand in hand to uncover the investigation. And then where did we see those investigations? Where was this public? Pull up the records, pull up the receipts as to this investigation that was happening during the Biden administration. But of course, she clarifies that it was under the Biden administration. We know how that went. We know there was no investigations going on. She's trying to play the American people. This is what she has always done. This is just crazy. And so here's the poll. Get your guys' votes in, at this last moment before we close it out here. We have the poll saying, is Donald Trump delivering on his campaign promises? Now, we have a majority no in the chat. And here we have 2026 and what is happening in 2026 and what we are looking forward to for the midterm elections.
Live from MP.
Siri is acting crazy. That's crazy. Just started playing NPR news. I don't even know what the heck that is about. Okay, so the majority thus far say no. Donald Trump is not delivering on his campaign promises. Now, I'm curious. What do you think he's not delivering on at this moment? Is it affordability? Is it... Yeah, no, thanks, Deadman. I appreciate that. It was Siri talking back because it was asking. It was I don't know what it heard. It's probably listening to me right now, actually. Probably heard it, but for whatever reason, started playing news and NPR. But right now, what the Trump administration is looking into is affordability. Affordability has now become the main subject, one of the main subjects when it comes to the administration trying to defeat the housing crisis, trying to defeat the sort of credit card companies by lowering the, or at least putting a year cap for 10%. There's a lot of things that are being tackled to help the American public as we are hoping to see a better, brighter future. Of course, this involves a delayed gratification, as the clip that we played yesterday from Charlie Kirk talking about the delayed gratification effect. Speaking of the founding fathers not having, or the founding fathers building this nation upon delayed gratification. Somebody says here, of course, he's delivering on his promises. Paul, welcome back. Glad to have you here. He's kicking out illegal aliens. He's stopped illegal aliens from coming in. A net zero, I believe, is the number. He stopped men in women's locker rooms and so much more. But there are states that are continuing to fight back against that sort of mandate that he's making. So we ended the poll here. So the majority of those, and I understand where you're coming from. I understand where you're coming from when it comes to even with the sort of mortgage, 50-year mortgage, which is a terrible idea made by many. Said by many in this chat saying it's a terrible idea, which I agree. I think they shouldn't settle for mediocre ideas to help the American people build for themselves a life, the American dream. Somebody said here she was dropping her kid off. Lie. He wasn't in front of the car. Lie. They just keep getting caught in lies, and you're right. The evidence that continues to come out because of the research that people are doing, the investigators that are on this. And somebody said affordability. Trump said affordability is a made-up word, but the context there is with the concerning the Democrats. Talking about the Democrats will say affordability, they talk about affordability, but they are trying to utilize this word to gain them sort of popularity looking into the midterm election so that they can hopefully gain the attention, put the attention back on them, that they might deliver on this agenda, and that the Americans will hopefully take another chance at the Democrats who continue to lie. I'm curious if this is actually true. Johnny, you say, no, there was an investigation going on into the Minnesota fraud, but then Tim Walz got elected and he brought the AG in and stopped investigating it entirely. Interesting. I'd like to know if that is actually true. But of course, Mamdani, who is the essentially the poster child of the Democrat Party, I think right now, because of something that, what's his name? Bernie Sanders said was, look, what Mamdani did in New York is the same sort of blueprint that we want to do across the nation. Said this on a podcast. He wants to copy and paste in every single state. At least try to do so. But he's the Democrat socialist. And the policies, which I was surprised by, one of the policies that people are in favor of, according to the poll that we conducted in this chat, of spending money on public toilets. I think the cost was around $4 million, if if I'm not mistaken, maybe more than that, to add more public toilets. The person that he wants to put in charge of, I think it's housing, what is it? Sia Weaver, the American tenant organizer. Tenant advocate. So she basically says that in a podcast or an interview back in 2021, I want to say, that this idea of individualism and collectivism, the same thing that Mamdani, some of the things that he was mentioning during his inaugural speech, that we want to end individualism and usher in collectivism. However, when you're looking at individualism, which is private property, and the things that she said concerning this, talking about even in quotes, about white neighborhoods, which is the same sort of, playbook of Mamdani wanting to bring in, or rather tax more of the white, richer neighborhoods. This is Mamdani, newly instated radical left tenant advocate Sia Weaver broke down Wednesday as she dodged questions from reporters about her gentrification hypocrisy. 37-year-old who faced backlash for blasting homeownership as a weapon of white supremacy in the past teared up when she emerged briefly from her apartment building in Crown Heights, Brooklyn, about 9 a.m. Weaver, who was taped by Mamdani to be his new director of the city office to protect tenants, quickly ran back inside after she was asked about the $1.6 million home her mother owns in Nashville, Tennessee. Interest in Mamdani's hire kicked off after some of her old social media posts in which the Rochester transplant railed against gentrification. Resurfaced last week. So here's one of the quotes here. It says, there is no such thing as a good gentrifier. Only people who are actively working on projects to dismantle white supremacy and capitalism are people who aren't, Weaver wrote in a 2018 post. Private property, including any kind of, especially homeownership, is a weapon of white supremacy, she also said in a 2019 post. This is looking bad for her. So, what we're facing in 2026, we must not get swayed by the politics of everything concerning America. However, let's go back to truth. And for many, truth is different for many people in this chat. But I hold that the truths of the Bible, of God, how he raises up kings and takes down kings, he changes times and seasons, God is in control of it all. And I'll put my trust in him that he will continue to do this work to fulfill all of his promises until it's time to get the heck out of here. Until he calls the Christian home, until he calls the believer, rather. Because anybody can call themselves a Christian, anybody can call themselves a Catholic and think they're going to heaven. The reality is, even with Trump saying, I believe I'm going to go to heaven because I'm doing good. I feel like, if I do enough good, I'm going to get to heaven. That is not the reality of what Scripture teaches. The reality of what Scripture teaches is simply that you believe on Jesus Christ, whom God had sent, the Father had sent for him to die, that he would rise, would forgive your sins. It sounds so simple. Like we just need to believe in somebody who died and rose again. It sounds simple, but it's really the heart that God is looking at. God is looking at your heart and wants you to align with him, give you his Spirit so that you can walk in the ways of the Lord and to put his calling, actually to fulfill his calling, to fulfill your calling as he moves you with his Holy Spirit. Somebody said radical Islam doesn't use words, they use guns. Christians pray. They're peaceful. But God, when he comes back, he will establish his kingdom. This is the ultimate political kingdom. He will be the king on the throne, King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. But if you do not take up your cross and follow him, you are not worthy of him. That means to die to yourself and to not be like those who are without self-control, arrogant, proud, lovers of good, or rather, no, not lovers of good. Let's see. What is the word here? Where is it? Lovers of evil. Looking for the passage here. Brutal. Yeah, not loving good, treacherous, reckless, swollen with conceit, lovers of pleasure rather than lovers of God. Even those having the appearance of godliness, but denying its power, avoid such people, for they creep into households and capture weak women. Burdened with sins and led astray by various passions, always learning, this is important, but always learning and never able to arrive at a knowledge of truth. That is important. Absolutely important when it comes to the believer, when it comes to anybody who is always attempting to learn, but never able to arrive at a knowledge of truth. Let that be a word for you. Guys, thank you so much for joining this podcast today. If you guys appreciated it and liked what you heard, liked what you saw, consider subscribing and consider joining us back here for another Equally Yoked Show podcast as we continue to cover the latest of everything that is happening in America. For those that want to support by a subscription, by subscribing, it's free. Of course, there is the paid subscription for those that do want to monthly subscribe. However, for those that want to super chat, by all means, it's great to do this so we can build this show to be greater than what I could ever make it by myself. We want to do live calls at some point. However, we talked about the fact that this is a program that we have by the Roadcaster, where it's basically it's a paid subscription in order to get minutes. So, however, we want to build this podcast to be greater than what it can be. And if you guys want to subscribe and support in that manner, like the show, share this podcast, and join back for another episode so we can talk about what is happening and how we can filter our lives through the biblical lens. Not interpreting the Bible by our current events, but rather filtering our life with the Bible. Helping us stay level-headed and keeping us equally yoked. Appreciate you guys for joining me on this podcast. See you guys in the next one. Peace.